We did it. We made it.
Finally, our first episode.
I know. So, everyone, welcome to the Dirty Chai Club. I'm Jasmine, and my cousin is my co-host.
Tina.
um, just bear with us while we get through our very first podcast that we're producing. I've been a guest on other podcasts, but this is my very first that I've had an idea about doing for years.
So, talking about that, how about you let us know where this idea came from? Where did Dirty Chai Club start?
So, at some point, I think it was 2019 or 2020 in the beginning it was the beginning of 2020, yes. And my sister-in-law and I would, this is like beginning of COVID, and the two of us would have like a bunch of conversations daily while we're both making ja in the morning. And so we were like, we're going to make this into a podcast. And my ja, I like to drink regular ja, but I also love drinking a dirty chai, which is basically just adding an espresso shot into your ja. Um, and I'm going to say ja because that is how we say it.
Not chai?
Chai latte? Haters. No, so that's kind of where this came from. Mito, my sister-in-law, and I would have these conversations, and they would be intense conversations about everything from geopolitics to education to just health issues that women are seeing. And a lot of it had a tone of South Asian women. And so we were like, let's make this into a podcast. The two of us actually even recorded an episode. This is 24 right now. So we recorded an episode in 2022, I believe, which is 2 years after our original idea. And then by the time we started editing and deciding to post and share, it was just time had gone and there was so much that had happened in both of our lives that we were like, let's just scrap it and start over. And now she has a lot going on with her life. Mito has 3 kids. So I'm like, hey, do you mind if I bring on my cousin as my co host? Just because I know you still have a lot going on, but the two of us have a lot of these same conversations that me and Mito used to have, which is around the education, around South Asian women's health, around geopolitics, all sorts of taboo topics that we are not meant to talk about. So, yeah, that's where
I
this
think this
is.
is going to be a great platform for others, definitely to hopefully relate in some matters. I know everything's not going to be relatable, but I think just bringing attention to topics that we even hear about, we might not discuss, but topics that we hear and that are going around. And I think this would be a good spot for others to join and maybe weigh in on it.
Yes, I agree. So I guess we can start with our first episode with the very obvious um topic, which is something that is not necessarily taboo, but everyone's had a similar experience and everyone's also had a different experience. And that is just having that dual identity of being an Indian girl growing up in America. And how does that look to us? And we're both in our 30s.
Yeah, maybe a little late 30s.
Stop it. I'm not there yet. I got 6 months. I could say late.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we've both experienced a lot in our lives that kind of have led us to understand a lot of things on a different platform, on a different way. And I think it's time that people actually experience and hear like what we go through. What they go through, what we go through is pretty similar. And I think that's something that we definitely need to recognize and talk more about is just how our lives were growing up. I can say from my experience, I grew up with a lot of friends that were not Indian growing up. When I was younger, I had a lot of friends that were of mixed race. You know, I had a best friend that was Hispanic. A lot of the people were, were just different ethnic backgrounds, you know, and I got to see what they did growing up. And I always wondered, like, I'm not in these certain types of sports. Like, you know, of course, I had loving, supportive parents, but they were always basically working, you know, as
Mhm.
part of our culture is. It's like work, work, work. You know, I saw parents showing up for certain things, and I'm like, well, my parents are not here, but I
Yeah.
knew their support was there. So I think it's definitely relevant to talk about how our lives are now, looking back at it, but also just how that shaped us to who we are. Um,
Hmm.
and I think
Do
that's
you
really
think
important.
that do you think that the experience that we had is different than the experience that like the young people are having right now? For example, our kids and nephews and nieces and stuff.
I definitely think so. I mean, I look at the freedom and the things that my nephews and nieces have, and I tell them, like, you should be thankful. You should be grateful for the things that you're able to have when it just comes to, like, having an iPad or having a Switch. I'm like, boy, like back in my days, we never had that. We had chalk. We had a coloring book.
We had a
Like,
ball, chalk, and yeah, of course.
and that was it. You know, we had neighbors to go out and play with. And not saying that they don't have that now, right? But there's so much more that they're able to have, even when it comes to just electronics, you know. They're able to have that where we had limited TV time. We were told to go outside and play, go do your homework. Like, there's certain things, right? Where I just feel like seeing the kids now, they don't see that. They don't see what we came from. Obviously, with technology, as time has grown, lives have changed, right? For the better, for the worse. There's arguments on both sides. But I definitely think I see that gap. You know, I tell them all the time, I'm like, when we got our Nintendo back in the day, I was like, you know, we had those little old ones where
You
you had
had
like
a
blow into
Nintendo.
them.
I had a 3DO, and it was a refurbished 3DO from my mama because my parents were not going to get me a Nintendo.
Yeah, but it was like that was like the one like luxury that we had, you know, and now it's like, oh, I'm gonna bring my Switch. Oh, I'm gonna bring my iPad. Oh, I have my phone that I'm gonna bring. And I'm like, I didn't even have a cell phone until I was in high school, late high
Yeah,
school. And that was like for emergency purposes only.
yeah.
So I definitely think it's different. I definitely think it plays a role in how we are. I mean, you're now a mom, you know,
Do
and
you do you think it's like because we're second generation, or do you think that it's just the time, or like maybe a combination of that? Because like I feel like people that so our parents are the immigrants, right?
right.
They're the ones that were born in India. They moved here to take advantage of freedom, of opportunities, and have a better life than they had in India. And so they um they did the work hard thing where they weren't really as present for their kids. And we are reaping the benefits of their work, and then our like the future generation from us, so they would be like one removed from the immigrant. They're obviously the ones that are like have everything a lot easier than we did. And so I guess my question is like, let's say there was somebody our age that is moving to America right now, and do you think that like it's because of that first generation difference is what I'm trying to say?
I get what you're saying. Like, if they're starting coming here, you know, this is their first generation coming out here, they're starting life. And you know, I understand we are second generations. It's a little bit different, but I still feel because of the way technology is, the way life is now, and it's so advanced that I feel like even if they are first generation coming here, it's gonna be the same. You know, I don't think that they have the same they have the same hardships that our parents did, right? But when it comes to just taking care of the kids, you know, now we have nannies. Back in the day, I didn't hear of a nanny. You know, now we have
Yeah.
nannies, we have childcare, we have daycare. Like, I have so many of my
Mhm.
friends who have their kids, you know, in
Yeah.
daycare and definitely doing all of that. So I think it definitely makes a difference. Um, but I think it makes a difference as to just the background, how the parents are, how they're taking care of their kids. And I think that's a huge difference as to how they're going to raise their children, just in my opinion.
I think you're right. It's like just what they have available to them in this generation that's coming from India versus like the generation of our parents that came from India.
Right.
And globally, we've seen a huge shift in things like parenting, for example, where we're like before it wasn't considered cool for a dad to be present.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I don't know if it's a combination of peer pressure or just dads actually wanting to be present because their dads weren't. But even like I have clients that are immigrants from India. They did the whole work hard thing and now they have kids, but they're really present for their kids at the
Yeah.
same time. And
And
like
I
their
think,
life and their quality of life is like completely different than what the quality of life our parents definitely had.
yeah. And I think that plays a huge role. Personally, I see my family, my cousins, now raising their children, and I see how they are. I see how present they are, and I think that plays a key role. Like, we didn't have so much of that. At least we didn't. There are other families, don't get me wrong, right? There's other South Asian families out there.
Yeah.
Um, but at least in our circle, in our family, it was very different.
Hmm.
Our parents prioritized making that living to give us a better life. Don't get me wrong, right? They helped us get to where we are today. Um, and I think because of that, we see that there's certain things our parents sacrifice that we don't want to make that sacrifice for.
Hmm.
And that comes down to like time, right? Where it's like, I
Hmm.
want to go to my kid's baseball game. I want to go to this dance practice. And I commend parents that are wanting to see that change and wanting to be that change. And I think that just shows how much we are progressing towards
Yeah.
our
It's,
society, basically.
I don't know if you can hear it, but my kids are just like wiling out there because it's evening witching hour. And I texted Minish to um, see what's going on, and I haven't heard back because he's swamped out there. So we're gonna keep this short. I had a couple more questions about, how do you think our experience as South Asians and as South Asian women, it like compares to other cultures also?
Gosh, I think that's really hard. I mean,
Well,
as much
because
as we,
we both grew up with other like ethnicities around us, right? And
correct.
it wasn't just like we only had friends and family that we hung out with that are just Indian. Like I grew up in a predominantly well, I guess initially I was in a very diverse area and then it was like predominantly Caucasian. So I've seen like a mix of people.
Right.
And you kind of grew up, you said, with like Hispanic people, Asian people around you. So
Yeah. And I think, when I look at it, when I look at just like the Asian culture, right? And I think of comparing ourselves, and I think the way we are raised as
mhm,
an Asian family, not just South Asian, as an Asian family, is very similar. However, very different than what I've seen as a Caucasian family, where it was like they were able to go to sleepovers, they were able to like do other things where I was always like, oh man, your parents are so cool,
yeah.
And I think that's where the difference is. Like in our Asian culture, we've always been instilled that like you have to do things a certain way. It's either this way or there's no way, really.
For the highway.
It's this way or the highway. Like you really didn't have an option. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is that as much as we don't want to compare, I always had that comparison growing up, and I'm
Hmm.
like, it's because I'm Indian. Like my parents are Indian. Um, I
Yeah.
can't I can't go hang out with you after dark. Like I have to be at home.
Yeah.
And I think that was like going through high school, college, like
Yeah.
I had to be home at a certain time when other people are like, what are you doing? Like, you're 18, like, you're an adult.
Yeah.
And I was like, am I? Am
Yeah.
I? Like, didn't
Yeah,
really
we're
feel
not
like an adult.
there's like there's no being an adult when you're South Asian. There's always like they're always going to be your parents kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Um
Even now. And I think that's the hard part. I mean, we want to be independent. We want to have this like different life. And just, we still want to keep to our roots. As much as I
yeah.
say, like, we might have had it harder, I understand why our parents tried to instill so much like culture and values in us because even now I'm like, there's times when my nephew will do something and I'm like, hey, like bakilao, like bow down, like they're
Yeah.
your elders, talk to them properly, like respect them,
Respect. Yeah.
have
Respect is
that
a big thing.
respect. Yeah. So I think that that's like a key thing to always just kind of remember is that we can talk about it. We can talk about the differences, which obviously is what we want this podcast to be about. But really, when it comes down to it, a lot of us go through a lot of things that are similar. It's just highlighted differently or talked about differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm most excited to talk about is like what we go through in our community, how we faced hardships, but like there are other people going through similar things and it just might be on a different level and a different scale. But I'm excited to bring that to everybody.
So tell you a story about sleepovers. I don't know, like on social media, there's like a whole thing about how like don't let your kids go to sleepovers now because you don't know what's going on at the other
Right.
person's house. And so me and Shibu is my sister for anyone who doesn't know, and you probably already know her. She knows everyone and their mom and their dad. But anyways, so the two of us were like, we can never ever tell mom and dad that they were right about us not being allowed to go to sleepovers. We can never let them have the satisfaction of being right because that's what it's going to be. And I think that the way in which we do tell kids makes a huge difference though.
Yeah.
So like the way our parents were, it was like, no, you're not going.
No
That's it.
explanation. That's
There's
it.
no explanation, right? So I think that there's definitely going to be like a difference because she has a son, I have kids now, and um knowing what we know now about the world, about how it works, about the unfortunate incidents that happen, and knowing all of that and just being more educated about all of that, I think our kids are going to grow up also being more aware and educated about those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
I already see people teaching their little ones like that are just 2, 3 years old, talking about consent, about talking about, you can't just like I was just at daycare pickup the other day and there was like a one of the children was the teacher was kind of being like, he really wanted to hug on his sister or somebody and then like we had to kind of pull him back and the dad was like, oh, what did we talk about? We talked about asking for permission first. And so it's just being taught a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And the reasoning is being taught a lot earlier for like why we're not going to go to have sleepovers, right? Or like why, if we are going to have sleepovers, they're going to be only at X, Y, and Z's house that we trust and we know, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think a lot of it has to do with the tone of the tone of what we were told things and the tone of I guess sheltering. There was a sheltering undertone to everything, right? Like we don't want you to know about like what's the reasoning behind
With the
the
real
things.
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a difference that we have now. I mean, social media, right? Things,
Hmm.
there's a good thing about social media and there's a bad thing. And I think one of the things that social media brings to light is everything that goes on nowadays. It's not like it didn't go on 15 years ago,
Hmm.
there was just as things just like that happening out in the world during that time, but we weren't privy to that information because we didn't have outlets like this that like instantly shared like there's a child that's been taken or there's an accident down the street, like whose family, right? And I think because of all of that, now it kind of at the same time for me scares me a little bit, I mean, you share your story. I had my nephew go on like a camping trip and I was like, I'm going to air tag his ass. Like, we're going to put in his shoes. Like, I'm going to put in his stuff. Like, I just don't trust it.
Yeah.
And my sister, Rena, and my brother in law both laughed and they're like, you're worse than we are. And I was like, I am. Like, I've turned into that person where I'm like, you know what? Like, I laugh at my mom because she always would say, like, I don't want you to travel. Like, you're going to get lost somewhere. Something's going to happen. And I was always so scared. And having him go on his first trip alone, mind you, was with his school. I was like, absolutely not. Like, how did you allow this? This is not what we do.
Yeah, but your mom also like sent you guys across country without supervision like several times,
She
like
did,
from California to New Jersey.
even to
Like you
India.
just get on the plane. Yeah, you guys went to India when you were like little kids, like without anybody.
Yeah. Again,
So
to her, that was like safe. It,
you know,
it didn't make
it's like
sense.
what's okay, what's not okay, like what makes sense. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, I see it now, I see that like, and like you said, it's like the tone and the delivery. But I think kids now are also, in a sense, more aware of things. They're understanding things. So when it is telling them like, hey, I don't want you to go to the sleepover because of X, Y, and Z. I feel like that would have made a difference to me growing up. Like, what's the reasoning behind you saying no to me for
Mhm.
all of these things? And they did shelter us. They don't want to tell us like, what if you get kidnapped? What if something like, you drink something like that you're not supposed to be drinking, or you eat something that you're not
Yeah.
supposed to be eating.
Yeah.
And I think that made a difference.
Yeah. So
So
we know what we would do different. But what advice I think would we give to this next generation of South Asians that are navigating this kind of dual cultural identity?
gosh, I think that's hard because I see us as this generation that is still
We lost your
it.
audio. We lost your video.
Oh,
Oh, there we go.
sorry. I feel like we're still in a generation where, we have the values that our parents taught us. We still go to temple. Like, we still do a lot of those things, right? If our parents tell us we have to go to prayer, like we do puja. We're not questioning it. I mean, there's times when we do, but we still have a lot of those things. And I feel like as the next generation comes along, a lot of those things are getting lost.
Mhm.
So, as much as I want to say, like, let's try to teach them this, let's try to teach them that, are they going to still have that growing up? And I feel like a lot of it is going to get removed. As much as
Mhm.
I don't want to say, like, I hope they don't. I hope they, obviously remember their roots and where they come from and everything that we try to teach them. Um, I feel like as the generations are going, a lot of that is on the back burner.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I feel like this can go on forever, but because like my next question to you is how do you think that we can preserve this balance? It's a fine balance, right? Like
yeah,
it's a super fine balance because you can't do some of the stuff that's cultural in India in America. You just can't.
yeah,
And there's just some things that you don't want to do that's completely American either. And so there's a fine balance of like the lifestyle that we live, right? Between doing all the things and living in American society, but at the same time keeping up with those roots and keeping up with the traditions and the culture and the language. Like, can our kids bust out in Gujarati? Right? Can that generation do it? And
yeah,
so it's teaching that from an early age. For me, I think about this a lot because of my kids. And so recently I've started to like make it a I try to. It's a lot harder than it sounds. Like we grew up speaking only Gujarati in our house.
right.
If the rule was this, in the house we speak Gujarati, if we're outside in public we speak in English. We never speak in our language in front of other people because that's disrespectful to other people if they can't understand what you're saying and they think that you're talking about them. So Gujarati in the house and Gujarati with elder people that don't understand English.
Right.
So that was the rule. And that's how we grew up. That's how we know our language as much as we do. And then sometimes as we grew up, we got smart mouthed, right? So we're in like middle school, we're in high school, and my dad's like, "મેં કેટલી વાર કહ્યું તને ગુજરાતીમાં બોલવાનું," right? Which means like, how many times did I tell you to only speak in Gujarati? And then my sister and I would just like bust out in like proper Gujarati. And then he would be the one that's like, huh, what does that mean? So then we laugh about it. It was just a big joke. And then we got to a point in our life where he didn't have to enforce it as much.
Yeah.
But it's like that kind of stuff. Me and Minish have like constantly been trying to do more Gujarati around the kids. And that's one of the things that we had to, like growing up, I had younger cousins who all went to, who all grew up here, and they all had like a different, I guess, level of parenting than our parents did. We're like kind of in that late 30s, and so their parents are a little bit younger. And for them, they were told at school that if they speak Gujarati at home, that they're not going to learn how to speak English, period.
Oh,
And they were told not to speak Gujarati at home, like from the schools. Like this is what was coming in.
that's
So that,
interesting.
yeah, and this is what was coming in from like speech therapists and stuff. This is like I'm talking about early 90s. And I recall like my aunts telling me this and telling me that this is why they don't, speak Gujarati with their kids because they
Right.
don't want them to have problems in school with English. And so we always used to be like, that's so weird. Like we're fine, right?
Yeah.
Um, and now they're finally going back to that. Like I was talking to the teacher at school the other day about the kids, and she's like, I wouldn't worry about their speaking milestones, especially in bilingual households. She's like, bilingual households, they always pick up language a little bit later and start talking a little bit later. But the good news is they learn both languages at the same time.
Well, I
So
guess
that's
that's,
the like it's
yeah.
like the new mindset, right? And so there's
Right.
a lot more. I would tell younger South Asian women, younger generation of South Asians in general, that there's just so much more embracing of culture now than there ever has been. And there's so much more embracing of our culture now by people who are not South Asian. And I think that people should lean into that more and use that as an opportunity to not only learn about what exactly and why exactly we do things the way we do it, but use that as an opportunity to educate correctly.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it's, in hindsight, it's like it's a good thing, right? Like that they're learning when they are. Um,
Hmm.
and that people are more interested in learning about other cultures than they were 10, 15 years ago. It's
Yeah.
only going to help them. It's only going to help us as a community, right? As people are
Mhm.
become more aware of what we're doing or what's that red dot that you put on your forehead, Like,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
as we become more aware and as they become more aware of different cultures, I think it's just an opening door. Um,
Yeah.
but I would definitely love to hear what some of our viewers have to say on that topic, on how they're, you know, raising their kids or how they're trying to teach them how to continue on
Yeah. I
with our
agree.
generation. Yeah.
I agree. So we'll start this back up. We have a whole list of topics for our listeners out there. Um, all sorts of taboo topics, all sorts of fun topics, all sorts of topics that are a little controversial. And we were given opportunities to by other people with other podcasts to say, hey, why don't you just use our platform that we already have built? And that was one of the reasons why we didn't want to, was because just in case we touched on something that their brand doesn't agree on, we didn't want to have that um, discord happening, right?
Yeah.
So we're excited.
We are nervous, I would say. I am. I've never done
Yeah.
this.
We're gonna plan our time out a little bit better next time so that my kids aren't wilding in the back. and I've been like just wanting to jump up and go out there this whole time, and help Enish, but we're done today.
Yeah. I think this was a good first episode. So thank you
Yeah.
for anyone watching. And let us know
Thank you
what
if
you
you
think.
got this far, listening to us banter on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so our next episode, we'll probably try to do a drop at least once a month,
Yeah.
maybe more often, but it all depends on our viewership. So if you liked what you heard, make sure you subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast on. And until next time, make sure you have a dirty try. Try it out at your coffee shop.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.